Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Margaret Gray and I am a psychological and relationship astrologer. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, Margaret Gray Astrology. Today, we are going to have a look at the April planetary waves. We're also going to particularly focus on Mercury retrograde. So do please join me as I share my screen and we start looking at what is going on in the planetary heavens next month. So, first of all, those of you who know me well know that I absolutely love the ocean, and I've in fact lived on islands all of my life, currently back in my hometown of Ireland where I grew up, and for many years in Honolulu. So I tend to think of planetary energies as ocean waves that we can swim in, we can surf in, we can dive, we can snorkel in, or at times we might just want to paddle in. So let's see how we can best navigate and have some fun with the upcoming April waves, because waves are always absolutely amazing. Always good to start by checking out the bigger waves first, and there are a few of them this month. Now, big doesn't mean bad. It just helps us to have an awareness about them because then we can navigate them much more easily. And also, the bigger waves tend to be collective waves that we all have an awareness of. But keep in mind that how they impact you personally depends on your individual natal chart, as well as the context in which you are living in, where you're living in the world. Now, the first thing to notice in April is that Mercury retrograde creates a bookend for the start and almost the end of the month, not quite. That's what we're going to focus on today. And also keep in mind that there's always a shadow period before Mercury goes retrograde. So we're in that right now. So if you're finding there's misunderstandings and confusion, that's part of the process. And also after it goes stationary direct. So it's less intense than the actual retrograde, but there's still an energy that kind of lingers, a little bit of a reverberation. Now, we are, of course, between two eclipses. The next eclipse that is really important is the new moon solar eclipse at 19 Aries. I'm going to talk about that separately in a few days. But for now, just be aware that it's helpful to know that this energy, this intensity that we're all feeling, is really all about change. Eclipses nudge us to make changes. And if, like me, you're in Aries, then you're really likely to be feeling the build up to this particular eclipse quite powerfully. And we know, of course, that the line of visibility is across parts of the US, Texas, New York, and so on. So if your birthday is this month, then it may actually be part of your solar return. Keep an eye on that if your solar return is close to the date. So if it is part of your solar return, big changes in your life. We'll talk more, as I said, about this closer to the eclipse time. It deserves space on its own. Now, on April 20th or 21st, depending on your time zone, we have the start of a whole new Jupiter-Uranus cycle, which no doubt you've been hearing about a lot. This is a very expansive energy of newness and change. Again, I will give, I'll do a separate talk on that. But for now, just have a look at where it lands in your chart, because again, you're likely to feel these energies happen on a specific day at a specific time, but we can feel the buildup. It's like a truck along a road. We can feel the buildup already happening way ahead of time. Now, let's look at the smaller waves that are kind of either side of these events. And I'm not going to give a lot of time, but just to mention them, because there is so much happening this month. The lovely thing is April 3rd, the month, once we go into the retrograde, then there's quite a bit of softness that happens thanks to the Venus-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, just before Venus moves into Aries. And that energy is a lot about unconditional love, really kind of connecting with the creative spiritual side within us. Then Venus bounces into Aries, where it joins the Sun, Mercury, Chiron, and the North Node. There's a lot of this Aries energy. Remember that Aries energy is about new beginnings. It's about leadership. It's about courage. And it's also about being careful not to be too reactive. So at the same time that we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, we also immediately afterwards have the Sun-Pluto square. Keep in mind, this is only the second time that this square between the Taurus Sun and Pluto is in Aquarius. So check April 21st, 2023 last year, because that was the first time we had this same square in the sky. Notice what was going on for you. It doesn't mean it's a repeat of that, but there may be another layer to that that comes out. Remember that we all operate layers and layers and layers as the transits happen. Now, the month leaves us. We have a full moon in Scorpio, which is likely to be a little intense, but also can be very passionate. And then the end of the month brings us the Mars-Neptune conjunction, which is at almost 29 Pisces, which is an anaretic degree. This brings in possibilities of change. Again, when we look at that Neptunian, whenever planets are with Neptune, there can be a softness. There can also be a degree of confusion. So just to notice, just a little heads up for anyone with addiction issues, April the 3rd and April 29th may be a little more challenging. When we have those Neptune transits, it can be a little bit more challenging for addictions. It's a great time, though, for creative endeavors. Trust your heart, and as always, trust your intuition. And notice your dreams. This is the realm of the unconscious, which is pre-verbal by nature. Okay, let's now focus on Mercury retrograde. Keep in mind that Mercury goes retrograde about 3 to 4 times a year. Retrograde is a symbolic thing. It doesn't mean that Mercury is suddenly spinning backwards in the sky. It's just from our perspective here on Earth. And all that retrogrades mean is that it's a much more introspective time rather than about taking action externally. If your natal Mercury in your natal chart is retrograde, which a lot of people have, think 3-4 times a year for at least 3 weeks, it's very interesting to see when it goes direct in your chart. Calculate that, because it just shows when your learning style and your communication style probably changed in your life. Could have been when you were a child. Mercury is, we know, how we process information and how we communicate. And as the retrograde in the sky impacts all of us, we're considering both the collective and the personal impact. So let's just quickly look at Mercury in Aries, what it's like just by nature. And these are broad sweeps, of course, broad brushstrokes of what it's like. Tends to be impulsive, can be quite impatient, can have, when I say a short memory, what I mean is that it can say a lot of things but not remember. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who's Mercury in Aries and your Mercury is, for example, in Taurus, your Mercury in Taurus is going to use words a little more carefully than the Mercury in Aries person. And the next day you might go back and say, remember when you said that? And they might turn around and say, I really can't remember. And they really can't. Mercury in Aries can be very reactive. When I say projectile, I mean that it can project a lot of words can come out. But again, unlike a Mercury in water or Mercury in earth, it may not edit those words or calculate those words. Very spontaneous, very playful, can be a little argumentative. So those are just some of the things that can happen. Now, retrogrades by nature are like a fog that comes up. So it obfuscates things. So let's look at what can happen with a retrograde. This is for all retrogrades. It's really a time to reconsider. Now, look at these aligned with the Mercury in Aries, an impulsive Mercury. You're telling it reconsider things, revisit, review, retrace, be more introspective, redo things, contemplate more. This is not easy for the energy of Mercury in Aries, as you can see, so it's going to require some effort on all our parts. Reactions, by putting these two together, Mercury in Aries, and making it go retrograde, they can be irritation. It's like you're slowing me down. I don't want to slow down. Mistakes can happen when we're irritated, when we're slowed down and we don't want to be. You know, when we're on a roll, confusion, miscalculation, blunders, misunderstandings. We need to be aware of all of those. Let me just quickly show you the chart, because the retrograde goes, the Mercury in Aries goes retrograde at 27 retrograde, and it actually goes all the way back to 16 Aries. Let me get my little laser pointer all the way back here. You will notice that at the moment, the North Node is on 16 Aries. So this is quite an important point that it goes back to, because as a collective at the moment, we are being nudged into this Aries energy. Then Mercury turns stationary direct at 1559 Aries. And then that, when it was last at 1559 Aries, you see how I'm going so fast already? It's the Mercury in Aries energy, because my natal Mercury is in Pisces, so it's not my natal Mercury, but it's interesting how we all get impacted. Just to say that when it goes stationary direct at 1559, the last time it was there was on March 3rd. So in a way, we're all being nudged back to March 3rd. And then as it starts moving forward, it doesn't get to 27 degrees until the 14th of May. So we are not out of the woods of this retrograde, and we are not starting afresh until the 14th of May. Back to the retrograde, things to avoid, arguments. Of course, arguments are best to avoid at all times, but particularly during the retrograde, there can be so many misunderstandings, and this Aries Mercury is very argumentative. Signing very important documents, not always avoidable, but if you can, best to avoid until after. If you can't, just cross your T's, dot your I's, be careful. There may be some points at which you have to go back to those documents. Not a good time for impulsive decisions. Again, if you can avoid them, give yourself some time to meditate on it, think about it. Not a great time to start new projects. It is a great time to edit current projects, though. If you've got a book, if you've got an art project, if you've got an astrology project, great time to work on it. Not a great time to communicate via text, particularly for important relationships. Be aware if you do that there could be misunderstandings, that your text may come across in a way that it wasn't meant to be. And we know that generally in life by this stage, but particularly during the retrograde. Great time to explore your own inner conflicts, ideas, thoughts that don't sit with you. Great time to ground, really important. This is a fiery energy that is being stopped in its tracks. Great time to meditate, great time to dance, great time to play music, great time to do things that help you to be aware of what's going on in your internal world. So I will leave you with that. And if you're interested in psychological and relationship astrology, I'd love you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to check out the Facebook page. We run relationship and astrology and psychological courses at least once a year, and we would love to welcome you to them. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you, and all the very best with the Mercury retrograde. Bye-bye from Dublin, Ireland. Take care, everyone.